Hey there once again, great to have you with us here on Leading Edge. I'm your host, Jeff Smith. Hope you're having a nice day. A recent letter to the editor catching my attention, not because it argued that Toledo has solved all of its problems, but because it suggested our biggest obstacle may not be economic at all. Daniel Pfaltzgraff, who teaches at the University of Toledo and works with companies around the world on innovation, believes that Toledo has developed a habit of talking itself out of its own ambitions. His recent column challenges us to rethink the way we see our city and perhaps its future. Daniel joins us here in studio. So I told you before you came on here, I said, I read, I go back, I see these letters to the editor, and I think, this is the pulse of Toledo. You thought the same thing. That's why, I guess, give us the why. Give the audience the why you did it.
Right
what
on.
You wrote.
Great to be with you, Jeff.
Yeah.
I will say I'm talking to a Toledo legend. I grew up eating my Cheerios, watching you on TV before I'd go to school. It's awesome to be here.
I'm glad we got that out of it. All right.
It was really a confluence of three things for
Yeah.
me. And so the first was America's 250th birthday.
Okay.
And so as America was celebrating its semi-quincentennial, I noticed that there was a lot of discourse around what America is and what it should be for the next 250 years. And so I brought that down to the local level. What is Toledo and what should Toledo be for the next 250 years? And secondly, during my time at Root, a consulting company that works with companies around the world, we focused working on Connect Toledo. And we had a project where we brought the people who run this city into a room together a few years back. And they shared their doubt, their desire, and their ambition for the city of Toledo. And they shared in that meeting that Toledo can get hooked on the small win, or we may not think as big as we could have. But in that meeting, we rallied together around a single priority. And at the time, that was the nautical mile, which has turned into Glass City Riverwalk.
Right.
And then lastly is the history on Independence Day. We can go into it later, but in the history of Toledo, there's some cool stuff that happened on July 4th. And my column was an invitation for people in Toledo to experience it. Come downtown, a packed ballpark, a packed promenade park, and fireworks over the water. Toledo is a great place to be. We've just got to shine a light on it.
I grew up here, right? And I've always said that it's always good to visit those big cities, but it's even better to come back, right, to where we are. I'm going to throw out a couple of the lines that you wrote in the letter and share them with the audience if they haven't seen it already. You wrote, "Holy Toledo, it's the only city nickname I know that doubles as a flinch." That's a good line, but what does it mean? What did it mean to you when you wrote it?
Yeah, for me, as I reflect on Toledo, sometimes I feel like the Toledoans are startled at the good news. And so sometimes we are skeptical of what we are and what we could be.
Yeah.
And so from where I sit, as I take a step back of looking at the Glass City, I see people who say Toledo isn't big enough to matter. Well, we have a national championship coming to Inverness in 2045, and 4 of them before then. The University of Toledo has ascended to the highest level of research activity. Not average, not very high, but the highest.
R1 status.
You got it.
Yeah.
Our metro parks, which we may enjoy by the day, are listed as the best by a national jury. And so for me, it's not that Toledo is substandard. We have the resume, but somehow we clam up in the interview in telling our story.
You also wrote, "A city talking itself out of its ambitions so it never has to be let down by them." Who is doing the talking in your estimation?
Right on. And so that's a quote that I heard in meetings by people who are in leadership roles in the city. And so we thought, how do we change that? Well, let's think big, let's think bigger. And so at the time in those meetings, we cast a vision for what does downtown Toledo need to be? The hub of people to live, work, and play. And so how do we do that?
Yeah.
Well, that means we need
As it once was.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
right? And we can go back in time in 1945 and see that model that was set out at the zoo on July 4th, casting a vision for what Toledo could be. And some of that came to fruition, one of them being the last passenger rail stations ever built in America. But between 1945 and 2026, somehow I believe that we've been selling ourselves short.
Yeah.
And we haven't been able to crystallize and articulate the value and the unique treasure of assets and catalytic projects, from the metro parks to a ballpark to an arena of walleye with over 100 sellouts to the renaissance that's happening downtown in Toledo. Residential, retail, and more.
Let's jump into I want people to know more about, they're listening. Well, why should I listen to this guy, right?
Yeah.
Sitting here at home right now. But Daniel, you grew up in the Findlay area.
Yep.
You went away to Columbus. You lived there, you worked there, you came back. You were drawn back, you said.
Absolutely. My gravitational pull is Toledo. And I believe from my time in Columbus, which is a little ironic, because Columbus is the city that never apologizes for its ambition. They never apologize for their success. But by being away from Toledo, I could see from a refreshed perspective what those who are in the city may not see, which is this collection of first-class assets. And it might be easy to say, well, we aren't Chicago or we aren't Grand Rapids. But these cities would be envious to have an institution of this caliber.
Even the Port Authority, as early as last week, saying that we need more world headquarters here. And, those are things that we can aspire to. I wanted to bring up one thing. We've got about 2 minutes left. But Darren Moore I had on a couple of months ago. Have had him on subsequent weeks. We've talked about the economic struggles of Northwest Ohio, what Toledo needs. And we've got a Ukrainian drone operation setting up in Holland, a big win, winning it over the state of Texas, obviously. But you point out in your piece, there have been a lot of pat on the back moments, ribbon cuttings, which we celebrate as quality of life moments. However, they don't necessarily equal jobs. They don't equal that big economic boon. So what he is calling for and what you are calling for, can they coexist?
Absolutely. Are you familiar with the concept of creative dissatisfaction?
Tell me.
So creative dissatisfaction is the gap between where we are and where we could be. So what unlocks, as you look at Toledo, that pioneering mindset in your brain to say we can and we've got to do better? And we have projects that have been catalytic, that have driven a lot of economic impact to Toledo. Think about Fifth Third Field, going from the Maumee area to one singular block in downtown, and we see the restaurants and retail that have catapulted because of that. Do we need more? Absolutely. I'm not denying Toledo of its problems, building blight, population loss, and fiscal strain. But what I would say is we can be creatively dissatisfied and also be excited by our success and hungry for more.
Has there, and we've got about 30 seconds, has there ever been a moment you've been in a meeting and you've been, stop thinking like that, or something has been said where you want to change the direction of the thinking?
Absolutely. There are times when we self-sabotage your behavior, and I would say let's cast a vision for the art of the possible. And for any young professionals or emerging leaders listening, I would say this. Ask yourself, what do you get energy from in Toledo? What do you think Toledo needs more of? And then go do that. Holy Toledo, let's co-create and impact the Glass City together. Boom.
And possibly go to the Toledo Blade and write another letter to the editor or show up on Leading Edge. I would rather have it here
You
first.
got it. Let's do it.
Daniel, great job.
Likewise.
Appreciate you spending some time. We really appreciate it. Stay with us. When we come back here on Leading Edge, 1 year after political turmoil divided the city of Maumee, voters may soon get a new way to hold their elected leaders accountable. We'll talk to the mayor, Chelsea Ziss, about a proposed charter amendment that could allow residents to recall elected officials. Welcome back here on Leading Edge. The past year has been anything but quiet in the city of Maumee following months of political controversy, recall petitions, and an Ohio Supreme Court decision that found the city's charter didn't provide a legal process for recalling elected officials. City Council has now voted to place a charter amendment before voters this November. If approved, it would establish for the first time a formal process allowing residents to remove elected officials from office before the end of their terms. Joining me now to talk more about that, putting this out there, is Maumee Mayor Chelsea Ziss. Thank you so much for being. I said this is the first time I've had you in here since you were elected mayor. We had you prior to.
I was previously just a dissident.
I can't get away from the, I don't know what word I want to use, Chelsea or Miss Mayor, as far as this specific piece of legislation, what you guys ran on and how, and I was telling one of our guests earlier, I said, so many times politicians change face once they get into office. You guys have really put it to the metal as far as what you believe, what you stood for, and what change you want to elicit. Is that fair?
I would absolutely say that's fair. A lot of us, whether we were part of the recall or part of the general, we came in with an idea of the change that we wanted to see. So being able to get in right away and really start working on that. And really, our Charter Commission had been working on this legislation since September of last year. Actually, almost probably just a couple of weeks after that overturn.
With your knowledge?
Yes,
Yeah.
and it was very public knowledge, and it was, they had multiple meetings. This legislation is about 10 months in the making. But the main thing with it, and I think the reason why we were able to push it forward in the way that we have, with an understanding and agreement with very diverse backgrounds and political points of view, especially on the Charter Commission, is that when the Ohio Supreme Court came back and they said, yes, your charter, it does have an intention for removal and for recall. You just don't have a procedure. All you need to do is put in the procedure.
Yeah.
So we left that to the Charter Commission, and they worked on it for months, did a great presentation. I have not seen, in Maumee, a more diverse group of political views, generational views, socioeconomic backgrounds, and they worked together and passed it through them unanimously.
You still got a couple of no votes on council for it.
Yes, we did.
You say with a smile.
Well, it happens, I'm sure, as anybody can see, if you watch the occasional soap opera of Maumee council meetings. There are sometimes disagreements and fireworks, and I think that's good. I think a little bit of public discourse and even, healthy disagreement and healthy conflict is an important part of any change process.
So let me ask you this. I wrote this down. I want to get it as it is.
Mm-hmm.
Some people will hear the word recall and think political retaliation. Others will hear recall and think accountability. Which one's right?
I would say, and this is actually a conversation I just had with somebody the other day, which is our charter and many other charters. I think Toledo also has similar provisions, that there is removal from office and there is recall. Removal from office is for malfeasance, nonfeasance, misconduct in office. Recall is one of the only ways that voters can directly participate in their local government. And it is about the accountability of, I do no longer believe that this representative is representing my best interest or our community's best interest.
Yeah. And that was your passion, was it not, when you ran, correct?
Yes. And as you know, I was originally, for a long time, against the recall. I was a late comer to even run in it. I do think it's important for residents to have a voice in local government, whether that's through citizens' initiatives, referendums, all of those types of things. And recall, those are some of the only direct ways that they can participate in that type of legislation.
I'm going to repeat a question that I asked you in the break. I'm going to bring it back.
Sure.
Just because I liked your answer. I asked you specifically, what did you think you had figured out going into office that surprised you the most? That you realized,
Sure.
I didn't know this.
I did not realize how excited everybody would be for change. Internally, externally, residents, staff, being able to have almost everybody across the board on board to take fast, exciting, enormous steps forward in a way that we haven't been able to do before. Resistance to change is 90% of change management research, theories, and training.
You used the word fear.
Fear, yes. There is a fear. I think there's a really big fear. The residents have fear. I believe our friend Steve Iwanek, who you were just talking about, when I first got in, the businesses wouldn't talk to him. There has been such a culture of fear in Maumee for such a long time. So when there is a changeover, warranted or not, I think that alleviated some of that fear, but some of it's still there. So we're always being really careful to try to make the right steps. So that's why we're doing that charter legislation, 10 months. We're doing a wage study. We're doing a water and sewer rate study. All of these things that we ran on, we're doing it, but slowly and in a way that's understandable.
And not, excuse the phrasing, but not rammed down people's throats, which is what we heard time and time again.
Yeah, that's the goal. We have passed a lot less legislation by emergency. We try to get in 3 readings and really use the emergency for when something does need to go into effect immediately because there is some sort of deadline or it's important to the community for the health and safety and welfare for the community.
Yeah.
So those are some of those things. And we have reinstated, we now have 5 council committees as opposed to just the few that used to meet, and they meet on a pretty regular schedule, almost monthly. We brought back the Parks and Rec Commission, the Municipal Planning Commission is meeting again, the Board of Zoning Appeals is meeting again, and all of those had not been meeting or basically doing their commission, what their duty is.
You've also tapped into mental health and the importance.
Yes, we've been really trying to do some morale boosting things. We did have, our Maumee City Schools has therapy dogs. And part of their job, because they are workers, is to go out into the community. And they connected with our fantastic PO, Nancy, and we brought therapy dogs through the building.
Yeah.
We're trying to do things to really create connections because especially since we have multiple city buildings, it's so siloed. People are not in proximity. So you might you have two people who've worked there for 7 or 8 years who have never met, trying to create those connections.
So if voters approve this amendment in November, what do you hope they see it as? A safeguard, an accountability measure, or simply just bringing Maumee's charter up to snuff?
I think a lot of it is being able to have a procedure. I'm a big fan of documentation and understanding. If the charter had said no, the intention of this charter is not to allow for removal or recall, I might have a different opinion. But the intent of the people who wrote that charter was to do that. I think for the residents, it's a safeguard, but it's also a difficult safeguard. That's one of the things the Charter Commission really talked about in their presentation to us, is that recall should be difficult. You should have a tough time getting it through. It should take an enormous effort in a large portion of the community. For us, it'll be 25% of the entirety of voters in the last election that to even just get the petition to do the recall.
Right.
And there's a reason for that. You don't want a frivolous recall. You don't want it to be engaging in personalities or somebody holding a grudge. If there's a reason, if 25% of your voting community comes out and says, we're done, I think that they have the right to be able to do that.
15 seconds. Maumee has gone through a lot of physical change.
Yes.
It is visible, right? Everybody can see it when they drive around. Are you happy with how Maumee looks right now?
I'm happy with how Uptown looks. I think some other places could really use some attention, particularly our outlying parks is a big passion of mine. And that's why we have the Parks and Rec Commission, and really just the infrastructure, getting the streets paved, getting the sidewalks fixed. We've relaxed some zoning codes so that we can encourage updates instead of making it harder for them to do so, because they don't have to spend extra money to do so.
Sounds like more news to come.
Oh, just you wait.
Mayor, great to have you here.
Thanks
for being a part of Leading Edge. Stay with us. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back once again here on Leading Edge. So great to have with us once again Lou Hebert. I am a big fan of his book, Day by Day in Toledo, and I want to bring each and every week that I can that he's available during the summer. You got a very busy schedule, sir, but I want to give people an idea of where we've been. And you were just saying some of our topics beforehand, it really draws into what this area was and what it has become.
Yeah, that's the one thing I've learned just doing so much local history, is how influential this city was at one time. We were one of the top cities in the United States, and when it came to its economic power, its influence, its political power, it was a major player.
Yeah, hoping to get back there again. All right, let's start off July 20th, 1914. And Toledo's lotus blossoms, why were those so well known?
Well, they were well known because they were so rare to have in the United States. They were the lotus blossoms of the Nile. Somebody brought these back, put them into the Maumee Bay, and there they were for a number of years, and people came from miles around from all over the country to see this the blossoming of the lotus blossoms.
Only place in America that has these sacred flowers of the Nile, you said, but where they came from?
We don't know. Some people think that it was actually Edward Libby who brought them back from many of his travels in the Middle East.
Interesting. All right, day ahead, July 21st, 1927. Fritzy, the story of Fritzy Bigelow.
This is a very strange but fun story. Fritzy Bigelow was 16 years old. She was part of the Bigelow family musical band down in Bowling Green, but they used to play at the Bayshore Inn Supper Club out here in Harborview. And on this particular day, she got, as part of a stunt, she and her band members got onto the wing of a Sikorsky 29 biplane and flew around the city of Toledo and over the Maumee River. They were not only playing the Black Bottom, but she got up and started dancing to it on the wing of the biplane. Fritzy Bigelow, whose first name was actually Virginia, ended up, as I found out later doing some research for an article in the press newspaper, is that she ended up becoming a music teacher in Bryan, Ohio, and only died not too many years ago.
No kidding. But life and limb, just to bring music to the people of the Glass City.
What a stunt it was.
Before it was the Glass City. July 22nd, 1864, and just one of Clyde's famous sons.
Famous son, Henry Birdseye McPherson, was the only Union general the highest-ranking Union general killed in the Civil War. And he was from Clyde, Ohio, Green Springs, actually. And he is buried, of course, interestingly enough, at the McPherson Cemetery, which is right across the street from his boyhood home. But he was an influential political leader at the time, or could have had a promising life in politics, a lot of people figure. When he died, William Tecumseh Sherman himself cried at the news that he had been killed.
Died in the Battle of Atlanta.
Right.
And you were saying that, you think about Ohio's history with the presidency.
Right.
And the fact that he was so esteemed as far as potential politics was concerned.
Oh, yes, very much so.
July 23rd, 1928. And I said I went back in these photographs and was just struck with how striking Amelia Earhart was.
She was. And she was in Toledo many times. And that was one of the most interesting things. I've not been able to figure out why she came to Toledo so much. But she was here right after she had accomplished her trip across the Atlantic, when they called her Lady Lindy, which she hated that name. But nonetheless, she came to Toledo, and there was a huge welcoming ceremony here, and she spent several days, and it was a big event. She came in by train this time, and she was very well known here.
July 24th, we got about 30 seconds, 1951, State of Ohio purchases McGee Marsh.
That's right. They bought it, $266,000, probably one of the best investments the state of Ohio ever made, because now look what it's become. It's now the birding warbler migratory birding capital of the United States.
Right, and every spring the target is put on Toledo. Luke, good to see you as always, my friend.
Good to see you. Thank you.
Day by day in Toledo. You can find it on Amazon.com. We'll be back right after this. Well, as always, we hope you have enjoyed this episode of Leading Edge. If you do want to reach out to the show, which many of you do, we appreciate it. Comments, ideas, suggestions, we make it easy for you. Just send us an email to leadingedge, all one word, at WTOL.com. My name is Jeff Smith. Always appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, listen, learn, and lead.